Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this radio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the concept of people in the West, in the Western societies, no longer having a stake in society, a stake in its future, a stake in the health society, a stake in the defense and protection and well-being of that society and the people within it. So just having a look at that as the wider issue, if you like, around that. And we've probably got, for the first time, certainly in modern history, all across the West, a situation where the majority of the Western population, and in each jurisdiction, do not have a stake or perceive that they do not have a stake in our society and its future. Now, the reasons for that are sort of different. There's the globalist agitators and confidence crushers, faith destroyers, and all that sort of thing. They've been very busy with that, taxpayer dollars, by the way, trying to crush and destroy the West, and particularly to break up all social trust. Something, and this is, having travelled the world many times and having been to many non-first world countries, that's one of the first things that strike you when you go to these other outside of the West, or it did to me in the very early days. And I started doing this business traveling at a young age. I was like 23 or something when I started doing it. And one thing that struck me even at that age was that how little social trust there is, and faith in the future, belief in the civics, in third world countries. Now, that can be because of tribalism and all sorts of things around Africa, a strange sort of lazy apathy that you don't really see in other countries, or certainly not to the extent you see it there. And also in countries where they believe that wealth is a set amount. It's a fixed amount all over the world. The whole world has to share $1. And if you have more than the other guy, it's because you've taken his share. And they've got, even today, the Indians in the subcontinent, the Pakistanis, they still see the world that way. Even some of the ones that you think would be quite sophisticated still have that perception. The idea of creating new wealth and so on is I wouldn't say uniquely Western, but certainly primarily a Western way of looking at the world. The Japanese, for example, and the South Koreans have broken out of those boundaries well and truly. But that's pretty much how the rest of the world sort of thinks. And that's creeping into has crept into the West now, particularly as the globalists are forcing more and more third world people, such as the Indians and so on, into the West, because they're bringing with them, because they have got the Indians as an example, but others too. It doesn't have to just be them. They've got a very they don't intermarry, or very, very few, less than 0.5% would intermarry. So they stay very much within diaspora. So they simply transplant their cultural and societal values and what they would see as morality and spirituality. They just transplant those to the West and bring along with them their corruption and their myopia and their laziness and their desire to parasite off Western wealth and so on. So, or there's a whole host of reasons why people are losing faith in the West. We're losing faith. We've lost faith, I think, generally in our government. I mean, they're all globalist controlled and they represent the globalists, are instructed and directed by the globalists. So we've lost faith in the body politic. We've lost faith in our media class. All they do is tell us lies, as indeed do the political class now. Globalization and globalism is unsaleable in the West. The only way they can do it is by forcing it on us and by controlling the media to just give us an endless barrage of lies and propaganda. That's the only way the globalists can do it. They lose control of any of the body's politics, as they did somewhat with Trump, or they lose control of the media, as they might with Elon Musk. taking over Twitter, and the jig is up, and they know that. So we in the West have lost faith in our political class because the globalists have weaponized everything in the West to push globalization and to crush any questions or dissent. Then all those institutions that we once trusted and believed in, all those hundreds of years, many hundreds of years of trust building, social trust building, faith in institutions, faith in our government, faith in our elected representatives. The globalists used that. They used our trust and our faith and our belief. They used that to secretly infiltrate all these organizations and the entire apparatus of Western government and organization. They infiltrated the whole thing and turned it against us without us sort of really realizing it. I'm sure quite a few of us looking, gee, that's a bit strange. I wonder what's happening there. Doesn't matter. Our elected representatives who represent us, they'll never allow this to happen. And of course, look how wrong we were. So not only are people looking at the future or looking at our current institutions and looking at how they've been, polluted and dismembered and otherwise destroyed, undermined by the globalists. But we've also, as in penetrating academia succeeded in, as indeed as the whole educational institution, the radical teachers' unions have succeeded in turning probably 2 generations of children against the family, their parents, the society, and against everything we stand for. There are now kids running around saying, well, all evil, and white people are evil, white supremacist, Hitler, fascist, Nazis, and the triggers for them jumping into that is that if you don't agree to an IQ 80 black lesbian being president of the United States, and you're fucking Hitler, you're a fucking fascist Nazi Hitler, and that shows that society is fucked, totally. Only if every white person, with the exception of me, of course, it's all the other white people that are bad, not me. And so these kids have got this view that our society, our history is bad and evil, taught to them by white teachers, paid by white fucking taxes, for fuck's sake, and allowed to do it by our supposed white government. Straight white males in government have just stood by, watched and allowed it to happen. So we've got an entire class, that generation, say anyone under the age of probably 25, or even maybe a bit older than that, who believes that Western society, Western people, Western history, Western institutions, Western methods of organisation and government and so on are inherently evil, bad, and must be destroyed and undermined at every tick of the white men, straight white males are the evilest of the evilest. They make Hitler look like a choir boy. And this is something that they're taught. So even in a private, expensive private school, talking, John, I've mentioned this in another video, but talking to I don't know, he's 15 or 16, son of some friends of ours, and he's got an assignment, or had an assignment, to pick three of his prominent heroes through from history, and so he's. I mean, the globalists could have almost given him and scripted him this. That's how fucking ridiculous this is, and how these teachers would get this across is also something that's beyond me. His parents don't seem to disapprove. They all seem to be not necessarily on board with it, but white people have done some bad things. So his heroes are Gandhi, for Christ's sakes. Now Gandhi, Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, and Martin Luther King. Now all of them anti-white, all of them non-white, all of them butting heads with what would have been the white establishment of the day, and So, I mean, Gandhi was from a wealthy Indian sort of upper class family. You know, his wider family had extensive business interests in India and also in South Africa. You know, they were in shipping and all sorts of stuff like that. So he never would have had to worry about money or anything. His family were wealthy enough where they could send him to England to study law at a university there, and you know, to pay for all his well, not only his studies but his lodgings and, you know, his food and accommodation and so on. So they were a very well-to-do family. You know, most of the families in England couldn't afford to send their kids to that sort of standard of education. So Gandhi was a rich guy, or from a wider family of wealth, and had a lot of leisure time on his hands. He didn't have to worry about putting food on the table or paying the rent or something. So he was in South Africa, got bored with that, working in the family business, and he decided that here's this bored rich kid, and who's got no purpose in life. He's meandering. Clearly, he's just you know, he's just drifting, and decides that he's going to. I know what I'll do. I'll oppose the British and say that you know, I'm for Indian independence and so on. So that's what Gandhi. Now Gandhi, remember, a lawyer wearing a suit and all this sort of stuff, suddenly decides to wear Indian cotton cloth and you know, shave his head and you know, look like a you know, a fucking guru of some sort, and go around as an activist. That was his shtick from then on. So we're not talking about someone who believed in it. You know, again, he was just a rich kid who was drifting with no purpose in life. He ended up that. Now, Nelson Mandela, the next hero. Mandela was an activist, and he was setting off bombs, killing people, and, you know, was a terrorist in the literal and absolute classic sense of the word. So he had a you know, a major role in that. I think it was the ANC, it was called, and he was associated with some murderous people. You know, his wife putting car tires around people's necks with petrol in them and setting them alight. It was called necklacing, and you know, he was associated with those sort of people. I mean, his wife, for goodness sakes. And so that he was sort of became the symbolic front man for African majority rule in South Africa. Gave him you know, legend status, in the Western media kind of coalesced around him because he was in prison for terrorism. Coalesced around him and sort of used that as a litmus test. When if you let him go, then South Africa is truly free. Now, the white South African government gave Mandela an option. They said if he renounces all violence and refuses to participate in any violent act, or with the National African National Congress, as they call it, the ANC, then they would let him go. And he refused to do that. That's something, again, conveniently overlooked in the. You know, I mentioned this to the kid. You know, are you aware? And he just looked blankly at me. Well, no, it was those white devils, those Hitler, those fascist Nazis. They kept him, and he did nothing. I mean, he was kissing babies, and they just arrested him for no reason, threw him in prison because they're fucking fascist. So even the history that the kid's being taught is so distorted and ridiculous that you know, I wonder how it could even get through. I mean, this is a private school. His parents would be paying $35,000 a year for him to go to this school, and that's before they have things like you know, extracurricular activities and excursions and things like that. I mean, he got an overseas trip the previous year, which cost him, I think, $12,000. So they're pushing $50,000 a year to put him through school. This is high school. Now. Martin Luther King was the other one. Now, Martin Luther King, I mean, regardless what you think of him, he sort of got the front man gig, and the media sort of put him there. And I mean, his sort of simple line, you know, one day we're going to, you know, he hopes that we're going to be judged by the content of our characters and not the color of our skin. Now that's a bit rich, sort of coming from someone like Martin Luther King, given his extracurricular sexual activities and so on. But he was the front man. Of the three of them, I would see him, on balance, that he would be probably a little bit more deserving, I think, than the other two of getting a Guernsey. But I said to this kid, it wasn't a single white person like throughout history that I'm given the accomplishments and achievements of white people. Given how they're for every one achievement that was by a non-white person, there are 10 achievements by white people. So let's put some perspective on this. And yet, in spite of that, there wasn't one white person. Oh no, white people have never done anything. Oh no, white people are bad. White people are. Oh, you mean I should have put Hitler on? Oh, fuck. So that's the standard. So that's what these kids are believing, that white history is devoid of anyone of merit, and white history is bad and evil. And if white society and its structures and its beliefs disappeared tomorrow, the world would not be poorer for it. Now, you can go with fine arguments. I mean, bear in mind he's 15 or something, but what about the rule of law? Or oh no, white people just murdered all the black people, Hitler, and before you even you can't really engage in any discussion. And the finer points of the rule of law, due legal process, these sorts of things, which are very Western. Why isn't he being taught those? And I was sort of happy because I see this kid just he's going to leave high school and go to university hating white society, believing it's bad, evil, it's guilty. It should be hanging its head in absolute shame, while all other societies, every other society, is morally superior and spiritually superior, and so on. Such as the Indians and the like. Now, the guy's got no life experience, and I'm sure, and he's not unintelligent, so I think the light will go on at some point, but it could be 20 years before the light goes on. So there's an entire society of young people, I think 2 generations, as in the current generation at school and the generation that sort of left a few years ago and going through college and into the workforce now. And given the proportion of jobs that are in government, NGOs, education and health, they're just getting refresher courses. Effectively, they're all getting refresher courses paid by the taxpayer to hate white society and believe that it's inherently evil and bad and has never done anything good. And always, no matter what good you point out, they'll always come back to one event that makes white people maybe look, oh yeah, but look what Hitler did, this sort of thing, and that they just can't see the bigger picture of anything. So they've been indoctrinated, and let's call it what it is, indoctrinated. So we've got those, and we've got the people who've simply lost faith. Now, on top of that, we've got the kids who come out of college with massive debt, and they're in their late 20s now, and they've got debt coming out of their ass, and they've got no real prospect of paying it off, because the cost of living in just basic terms, just paying. I mean, if you're living on an ordinary wage and trying to, even in a 1-bedroom modest apartment in a sort of a lower middle class area, you're probably paying 50 to 60% of your wage just on rent. So that gives you an idea of the purchasing power, how it's just disappeared. So a lot of children are staying still at 30 years old. They're still living with their parents because they've got these very substantial college debts on bullshit degrees that aren't worth a pinch of shit. And all they've done is learn how to hate white people and white society and imagine that white supremacists are everywhere and Hitler's under every rock and this sort of thing, without any basis, any ability to reason through the issues. Well, how can Hitler be under every rock? Why are you saying that? They just don't have the reasoning ability even to come to grips with the idiocy of the position that they've been told and indoctrinated to take. This was something that the previous generations could have worked through. You may take things on board first off, but then you sort of reason, well, hold on a minute, well, that can't be right. the North American Indians were murderous. They were killing each other, hand over fist. How can you say that they lived in some sort of nirvana paradise when evil Whitey came along? That's simply not true. It's not even remotely true. I mean, there's barely a word of truth in that sort of line. And so you can start to reason through these things and then dismiss them as nonsense, and similarly dismiss those who would tell you such lies and try and force them into your head. So if we look at those people that have the college debt and they're living at home, and I know some of them, and some of them are like the eldest children of people that we know. And you ask and sort of talk to them about the future as they see it, and they don't have a future. The only work as they see it they'll ever be able to get will kind of just be enough to pay through day to day, maybe to run a car. They're living with their folks, run a car, maybe give the folks a little bit of money, help them out. But otherwise, it's just enough for them to get by and do their partying and hang out with their buddies and that sort of thing. And just the expenses of living life day to day. And their only future is, I'm thinking of two children now. The only future is when their parents die, they'll be able to get the house, and they figure that they get half each. That they'll be able to buy maybe some modest apartment in a pretty sort of low rent type area, and that'll be it. That's their future. They have no concept they'll be able to achieve anything, do anything. Their only concept of contribution to society isn't for society or the benefit of the society. It's for things like going on climate change marches and those sorts of things. They've been suckered into thinking, well, we're not just saving the country, we're not saving our jobs in this area, we're not saving our fellow citizens, we're saving the world. And the people that are polluting the world are about to go, because the old world's going to end. People are doing it. Hitler! And they're white people and supremacists, and they're the racists, and all this sort of thing. It just sort of merges into one total miasma of hatred against white society and white people. But none of them are prepared to really lift a finger or volunteer for community work or help, because they see, well, white society is so bad that why should I do anything to help it? And the sooner it dies, the better, which is, of course, what the globalists want. A passive bunch of serfs that the globalists can just quietly cruise in and just take over. And if anyone gets a little bit, expresses concern about what's happening, is, are you a white supremacist? Are you a fascist? Are you Hitler? And you can see already how that narrative, the power of it with these people, it will play out in the future. So I think in totality, we're now down to a minority of people that believe in our society, and the majority do not believe in it and have no stake in it. They have no skin in the game. They're not going to have children. They barely see why they should get married. Or buy property or attempt to buy property, and bear in mind the cost of living is a big factor in that consideration. But these people, they have no concept that the future has even the smallest bright light. That there's even at the end of a long tunnel, there's some light down at the end of that tunnel. They haven't even got that. And then there are people, like me, and I assume others like me, that believe there is a possible future, but we need to get rid of the globalists. We need to get back to some basics, such as the rule of law, due legal process, elected representatives that represent the fucking people, probity with tax, not globalist corruption and big end of town financial houses giving waterfront mansions to politicians that vote the right way. We've got to get back to the sort of social involvement and the responsibilities that a citizen has to the citizens, to their fellow citizens, and to each other, and really, I believe we need to get back. And then once we do, or if we can, or there's that sort of move, and I think Donald Trump would be a good start with that. Then I think we're moving back into the right direction, and that would begin to restore confidence of many people that have either lost confidence or believe that unless we do something radical, as in the rule of law, due legal process, lest we do these sorts of things that we are lost as a society. Now, similarly, the globalists have been expert at breaking off various little chip society. There's the gay, there's the lesbian, there's the the racism, there's various victim classes. They're very good at creating, and the whole media establishment swings in behind it. People, trans people, for example, that's now a huge new victim class that's really dominating the media. And so they've created all these other groups that equally have no common. Society's so bad. It's, Hitlers are everywhere, fascists, Nazis, white supremacists, and all these people, these little groups, which they're 1% here, 0.5% there, 3% over there, but in total they form a decent group in totality, in aggregation, and none of them believe it. They've all been taught to believe that their victims are oppressed by those evil Hitlers everywhere. So we need to get away from that sort of stuff and say that everyone must take a responsibility in their society. Now, in terms of voting, probably the time when, in, say, Britain, using Britain as an example, it was in the 1880s, the government of William Gladstone at the time, where I suppose approximately 75% of the people were voting. That was like 65% of the men, 10 to 12% of the women were voting. And this is obviously before universal franchise. Now, that was probably the high point when people with the biggest stake in society and the biggest stake in having a successful society and would vote in favour of what was good for the common good, or at least for that 75%. That was probably the high point. That's when the trade-off between social responsibility, skin in the game, and the vote and the power to decide government. That was probably when that trade-off was at its high point. But what changed that was World War, because there was mass mobilisation of men, many of whom didn't have the vote or wouldn't have had it, and mass mobilisation of women into the workforce, and government control and intrusion into society on a level hitherto that would have seemed unimaginable. And then that led to universal franchise. But still, there was the responsibility there. Universal franchise still contained a responsibility of mass conscription of men to fight in the wars, and also the mass conscription of women to work in things like factories, and the conscription of women to work as nurses and the like. So there was still that social contract of responsibility. Now, there was a gap there between only 21 years old to vote, but 18 to be called up for the national service. That was then corrected, because I do believe if you're going to get called up to serve your country, particularly if people are going to shoot at you, then you have the right to vote. I believe the two must go together. And then that was the final thing, I guess, in bringing the situation we have today, where 18-year-olds having the vote, and then conscription was lifted, so the conscription became a no-no, and that meant women not being drafted into the workforce under government direction. So all this together removed the responsibility that the citizens had to the civis, while still they kept the vote, and then that imbalance is playing out, and what we see, or largely see, today. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.